Her true story from Ohio. She raised him for 15 years, then his mother returned for the money. I was folding a towel when I realized my life had already ended. Not the dying kind of end, the other kind. The kind where you are still breathing and walking and buying milk, but everything that made you you has been cut out like a cancer, and they just sewed the skin back over the hole and told you to go home. It was a Tuesday. It was always a Tuesday with her. The towel was blue, a soft, faded blue from years of washing. I remember pressing it against my face because the fabric still smelled like my laundry detergent, and that was the only comfort I had left. My hands were shaking, but they always shook now. The doctor said it was anxiety. I told him anxiety doesn't steal your grandchildren. He wrote me a prescription anyway. My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie. I am 68 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, near the old Kroger where the parking lot lights buzz at night, and the teenagers race their cars until the police come. Before the apartment, I lived in a house, a real house, with a porch and a garden and a kitchen where I cooked dinner every single night for 23 years. That house belonged to my husband and me. Then my husband died, and the house belonged to me. Then my daughter took it. Not legally at first, just slowly, like water eating away at a riverbank.
Let me start at the beginning. Not the very beginning, because nobody has time for that, but the beginning of the end, which was also the beginning of him, the boy, my grandson, the one I raised for 15 years like he was my own 5th child. His name is Lucas, Luke. He came to me when he was 3 years old, a plastic bag of clothes and a half-eaten granola bar, and eyes that had already learned not to cry. His mother was my daughter's husband's sister. Does that make sense? Probably not. Families get tangled. The important thing is that his mother was young, and she was an addict, and she left him at a bus station in Akron with a note pinned to his jacket that said his name and his birthday, and please help him. My daughter Karen called me at 6 a.m. She was crying so hard I thought someone had died. She said, "Mom, we have to take him." She said they're going to put him in foster care if nobody takes him. She said we can't let that happen. I drove to Karen's house that morning. She lived in Grove City then, a little ranch with a chain-link fence and a dog that barked at everything. Her husband Derek opened the door. He looked exhausted. There was a small boy sitting on their couch eating dry cereal out of a plastic bowl. He had dark hair and a bruise on his arm that nobody explained. I knelt down in front of him. I said, "Hi, Luke, I'm your grandma." He looked at me with those flat, tired eyes, and he said, "Can I watch cartoons?" That was the first time I held him. I didn't even hold him. I just sat next to him on the couch, and he leaned into my side like a baby bird looking for warmth, and I knew right then that I would do anything for him. For the first year, Karen and Derek were good with him. They really were. Karen took him to doctor appointments. Derek taught him how to ride a tricycle. They bought him a bed with race cars on the sheets. I came over 3 times a week to help. I made dinner, I did laundry. I sat with Luke when he had nightmares, which was often. He would wake up screaming for his mother. Not his real mother. He didn't remember her. He screamed for Karen. He called her Mama. And Karen would go to him and hold him and tell him she wasn't going anywhere. I believed her. We all believed her. Then Karen got pregnant, her 2nd child. She had a daughter named Chloe, who was 4 at the time. Chloe was a sweet girl, but she had needs, special needs. I don't like labeling children, but the doctor said developmental delays and behavioral issues, and Karen spent most of her energy just keeping Chloe from hurting herself. When she found out she was pregnant again, she sat me down at her kitchen table and she said, "Mom, I can't do it all." She said, "I can't take care of Chloe and a new baby and Luke." She said, "I'm drowning." I understood. I was a mother. I had raised 4 children of my own. I knew what it felt like to be pulled in too many directions. So I offered to take Luke for a while, just until the baby was born. Just until things settled down. Karen cried and hugged me and said I was a saint. Derek shook my hand and said they would take him back as soon as they could. Luke was 4 years old. I packed his race car sheets and his favorite stuffed dog, and I drove him to my house. The house with the porch and the garden. the house where I had raised my own children, the house that was too big for just me, since my husband had passed 2 years earlier. Luke slept in my youngest son's old room. I painted it blue because he liked blue. I bought him new pajamas and new shoes and a backpack for preschool. I took him to the park every afternoon. I taught him how to plant tomatoes in my garden. He called me Grandma at first. Then he called me Maggie because he heard my friends say it. Then one night he was sick with a fever, and I was holding him in the rocking chair, and he whispered, "I love you, Mom." I didn't correct him. I should have corrected him, but I didn't, because in that moment I felt like his mother, and maybe that was my first sin. The weeks turned into months. The baby was born, a boy named Ethan. Karen called me from the hospital and said everything was fine, and she would come get Luke in a few weeks. A few weeks turned into a year, then 2 years, then 5. Every time I brought it up, Karen had a reason. Chloe needed surgery. Ethan wasn't sleeping through the night. Derek lost his job. Their roof leaked. Their car broke. There was always something. And I didn't push because I loved Luke. I wanted him. He was mine now, in every way that mattered. I went to his parent-teacher conferences. I took him to the dentist. I stayed up with him when he had croup. I taught him how to tie his shoes and ride a bike and say please and thank you. I was the one who ran to when he fell off the monkey bars and split his chin open. I was the one who held his hand while the doctor put in 4 stitches. I was his mother, the one who showed up, the one who stayed. But the state didn't see it that way. Legally, Luke was still in Karen and Derek's custody. They had never signed anything over to me. They just let me keep him. And I was too trusting to ask for papers, too naive, too busy loving a little boy to think about lawyers and courts and what happens when someone decides they want something back. Luke was 7 when Karen started changing. I noticed it first at his birthday party. I had a small party at my house, a bounce house in the backyard, a cake with superheroes on it. Luke was so happy he was almost vibrating. Karen showed up 2 hours late with Chloe and Ethan. She didn't bring a gift. She didn't help with anything. She sat on my couch and scrolled through her phone and ate my food. And then she said, "Mom, you're spoiling him." She said, "He's getting entitled." She said, "You need to be stricter." I looked at Luke running through the sprinkler with his friends, and I saw a normal, happy boy. I said, "He's fine." Karen rolled her eyes. She said, "Whatever. You always think you know better." That was the first time I felt it, that cold little thread of something wrong. But I pulled it out and threw it away because she was my daughter and I loved her, and I wanted to believe she was just stressed. Things got worse over the next few years. Derek started a new business, something with landscaping. He was gone all the time. Karen was alone with Chloe and Ethan, and she was struggling. I helped when I could, but I had Luke. I had a full-time job at the school cafeteria. I had my own life. Karen started calling me less. When she did call, she sounded bitter. She would say things like, "Must be nice to only have one kid to worry about," or "Must be nice to have extra money." I didn't have extra money. I worked 40 hours a week, and I spent most of my paycheck on Luke. Clothes, school supplies, summer camp, braces. Braces cost $4,000. Karen didn't offer to pay a penny. I took out a loan. Luke was 10 when my husband's brother died, my brother-in-law Frank. He left me some money in his will. Not a fortune, $42,000. Enough to fix my roof and pay off my car and put the rest in savings for Luke's college. I cried when I got the check. Frank was a good man. He used to bring me flowers every Easter. I told Karen about the money because I was happy and I wanted to share good news. That was another mistake. That was the mistake that cost me everything. Karen showed up at my house 3 days later with a spreadsheet. She had printed it out, 27 pages. She sat me down at my kitchen table and she showed me all the money she and Derek had spent on Luke over the years. Diapers when he was a baby, food, clothes, doctor visits. She had calculated every single penny. The total was $31,000. She said, "You owe us." She said Frank's money should go to us to pay back what we spent on your grandson. I stared at her. I said, "Karen, I raised him. I paid for everything for 10 years. She said, "That was your choice." She said, "We had legal custody." She said, "We could have taken him back any time, but we let you keep him as a favor. And now you owe us." My hands started shaking. I remember looking at the kitchen clock. It was 4:15 in the afternoon. The sun was coming through the window and lighting up the dust motes floating in the air. Everything looked so normal. The dishes in the sink, the calendar on the fridge, Luke's school picture magneted to the door. And my daughter was sitting across from me telling me I owed her $31,000 for the privilege of raising a child she had abandoned. I said no. That was the only word I could get out. No. Karen stood up. She gathered her spreadsheets. She said fine. She said we'll do this the hard way. And she left. I didn't hear from her for 2 months. 2 months of silence. She didn't return my calls. She didn't answer my texts.
On Luke's birthday, she sent him a card with $20 and no return address. Luke asked me why his mama didn't love him anymore. I said, "She does love you, honey. She's just busy." He looked at me with those eyes, the same flat, tired eyes he had at 3 years old. He said, "Okay." But he didn't believe me. And honestly, neither did I. The hard way came on a Wednesday. I was at work when the sheriff's deputy walked into the school cafeteria. He asked for me by name. He handed me a thick envelope. I opened it in the bathroom stall because I didn't want anyone to see my face. It was a petition for custody. Karen and Derek wanted Luke back. They claimed I was an unfit caregiver. They claimed my age made me incapable of meeting his needs. They claimed my home was unsafe. They listed everything: the crack in my driveway, the dead tree in my backyard, the fact that I had forgotten to pick up Luke's ADHD medication 3 times in the past year. 3 times, out of 365 days. They made it sound like I was a neglectful monster. I called a lawyer the next day. Her name was Patricia. She was young and sharp, and she listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and she said, "Maggie, I'm going to be honest with you." She said, "You have no legal standing. You never adopted him. You never got guardianship. You've been operating on a handshake agreement for 11 years. She said his parents have a legal right to take him back.
Even if they've been absent, even if you did all the work, even if he calls you mom, the law doesn't care about any of that." I asked her what I could do. She said we could fight it. She said we could argue that taking him now would cause emotional harm. She said we could bring in a child psychologist. She said we could try to prove that Karen and Derek were doing this for financial reasons, not because they actually wanted Luke. But she said it would be expensive, and it would be ugly, and it would hurt Luke more than anything. She said the best thing I could do was try to negotiate, try to settle, try to keep some kind of relationship. I spent $5,000 on Patricia, money I didn't have, money I borrowed from my friend Carol, who was widowed like me and living on Social Security. Carol gave it to me without hesitation because she had watched me raise Luke and she knew what he meant to me. She said, "Fight for him, Maggie, fight like hell." So I did. The negotiation lasted 4 months. 4 months of meetings and phone calls and emails that made my stomach turn. Karen didn't come to any of the meetings. She sent Derek. He sat across from Patricia with his own lawyer, and he talked about Luke like he was a piece of property. He said things like, "We are willing to allow supervised visitation on holidays." He said things like, "We will not be seeking child support retroactively." He said things like, "We are being generous given the circumstances." Generous. They were taking a child I had raised for 11 years, and they were offering me holidays. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my chair through the window. But I sat there with my hands in my lap, and I said, okay. I said okay to everything, because I was terrified that if I said no, they would take him and I would never see him again. The day they came to get him was the worst day of my life. Worse than my husband's funeral. Worse than anything. Luke was 15 years old. He was tall and skinny, and his voice was changing, and he had a girlfriend named Maya who wore too much eyeliner. He knew what was happening. I had told him 2 weeks before, because Patricia said I had to prepare him. He didn't cry when I told him. He just sat on his bed and looked at the wall, and after a long time, he said, "She doesn't want me. She just wants the money." I said, "I know, baby. I know." He said, "Why are you letting her take me?" I said, "Because I don't have a choice." He said, "Yes, you do. You can run away with me. You can take me somewhere they can't find us." I almost did it. I almost packed the car and drove to Canada. But I was 65 years old, and I was tired and I was scared, and I didn't want to make everything worse. So I hugged him and I told him I would always love him and I would always be here, and he could call me anytime. He looked at me with those eyes again, those flat, tired eyes, and he said, "Okay, Grandma." Not Maggie, not Mom, Grandma, like I was already a memory. Derek pulled into my driveway at 2 o'clock. He was driving a new truck, a big black Ford with a bed that had never carried anything heavier than groceries. Karen was in the passenger seat. She didn't get out. Derek came to the door and stood there with his arms crossed, like he was collecting a debt. Luke had his backpack and one suitcase. He left the race car sheets. He left his stuffed dog. He walked past Derek without saying a word and got in the back of the truck. I watched him buckle his seatbelt. I watched him look at me through the window. I raised my hand to wave. He didn't wave back. The truck pulled away, and I stood in my driveway for a long time. Then I went inside, and I sat on his bed, and I held his pillow, and I screamed into it until my throat was raw. That was 2 years ago. Luke is 17 now. I have seen him 4 times since that day. 4 times in 2 years. Each visit was supervised by Karen. She sat in the room scrolling through her phone while Luke and I tried to talk. He's different now, harder. He told me he hates living with them. He told me Chloe hits him and Ethan steals his bangs and Karen treats him like a servant. He told me Derek made him work on landscaping jobs every weekend without pay. He told me he wants to leave the day he turns 18. He told me he wants to come live with me. I said, "You can." I said my door is always open. Then Karen looked up from her phone and said time's up. And just like that, he was gone again. The money came back. Of course it did. Karen filed a civil suit against me 6 months after she took Luke. She claimed I owed her for back child support. She claimed that since I had been the custodial parent, I should have been paying her all those years. The judge looked at the case for 30 minutes and threw it out. But the damage was done. I spent another $8,000 on legal fees. I drained my savings. I had to take out a reverse mortgage on my house. That's how I lost it. The house with the porch and the garden. The house where I raised my children and my grandson. The house I thought I would die in. It belongs to the bank now. I live in this apartment with my 2 cats and my regrets, and the silence that fills every room like water filling a sinking ship. I still fold towels. I still go to the grocery store. I still sit in the parking lot and cry sometimes. I still look at every teenager I see and wonder if they're happy. I still check my phone 100 times a day, even though Luke can only call me when Karen isn't listening. He calls about once a week. He whispers. He says, "I love you, Grandma." He says, "I'm getting out." He says, "Wait for me." And I say, "I'm waiting, baby. I'm right here." But the waiting is killing me, because every day I realize more and more that I lost him twice, once to his mother and once to my own daughter. Karen doesn't speak to me anymore. After the civil suit was thrown out, she sent me a text message. It said, "You ruined our family. You stole my son, and you turned him against me. I hope you're happy." I read it 10 times. I wanted to respond. I wanted to say I didn't steal him. You gave him to me. You left him on my doorstep like a bag of old clothes. I wanted to say I raised him when you wouldn't. I loved him when you couldn't. I wanted to say you didn't want him until you thought he could make you money. But I didn't say any of that. I just deleted the message, and I blocked her number, and I sat in the dark, and I let myself feel the full weight of what it means to lose a child who is still alive. People ask me if I regret it, if I could go back to that morning when Karen called about a 3-year-old boy at a bus station. Would I do it again? The answer is yes. Every single time, yes. Because Luke is worth it. He was worth every penny, every sleepless night, every tear, every court date. He is a good boy, a kind boy. He volunteers at an animal shelter on the weekends. He wants to be a vet. He still calls me on my birthday. He still remembers my favorite flower as peonies. He is the best thing I ever did, and I didn't even give birth to him. That is the cruelest joke of all. The children you choose are sometimes the only ones who ever really belong to you. My other children don't understand. My sons, the ones I gave birth to, they live in other states now. They call on Christmas and Mother's Day. They send gift cards. They say, "Mom, you need to let this go." They say, "You're obsessing."
They say Karen is never going to change. They don't get it. They don't understand what it feels like to have a piece of your heart walking around in the world, and you can't hold it. You can't protect it. You can only wait and hope and pray that it comes back to you. I don't pray anymore, though. I stopped going to church after the custody hearing. Not because I lost my faith, because I looked at the stained glass window and I saw the face of a mother who watched her son die, and I thought, at least she knew where he was. At least she was there at the end. I don't know where Luke is half the time. Karen moved them to a new house in Lancaster. I don't have the address. She made sure of that. The only contact I have is a phone number that changes every few months because Derek keeps losing his phone or dropping the plan or whatever excuse Karen gives when I ask. They don't want me to find him. They don't want me to have a relationship with him. They want me to disappear. They want me to fade away like an old photograph until nobody remembers that I was the one who got up with him in the middle of the night, the one who bandaged his scraped knees, the one who taught him how to read, the one who loved him when his own mother chose drugs over him. But I won't disappear. I am 68 years old, and I am tired, and I am broke, and I live in an apartment that smells like cat litter and old regret. But I am still here. I am still waiting. Luke turns 18 in 8 months. He will graduate high school next spring. He will be a legal adult, and he will come to me. He promised. He swore on everything he loves. And I believe him, because I have to believe something. Because if I don't have that, then all of it was for nothing. Every sacrifice, every heartbreak, every night I stayed up wondering if I had done enough, if I had loved him enough, if I had been enough. I was folding that blue towel when I realized my life had already ended. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it just changed shape. Maybe I am not the mother I thought I was. Maybe I am something else now. A woman who lost everything and is still standing. A woman who raised a boy who calls her every week and whispers "I love you" into the phone. A woman who knows that love is not about legal papers or blood or who gets the house. Love is about who shows up, who stays, who fights, even when the fight is already lost. I am that woman. I am still that woman. And when Luke walks through my door 8 months from now, I will wrap my arms around him and I will not let go. Not ever again. Because he is my son. He has always been my son, and nobody can take that away from me. Not Karen, not Derek, not the courts, not the bank, not the silence, not the years. He is mine, and I am his, and that is the only truth that matters. The towel is folded now. I put it in the closet with the others. There are 17 blue towels in that closet, all faded, all soft, all washed 100 times.
They don't match anything. They don't have to. This is my life now, mismatched and worn down, but still clean, still useful, still here. My phone is ringing. I don't recognize the number, but I answer anyway, because hope is a disease, and I am terminal. It's Luke. He's whispering. He says, "Grandma, I need you to come get me." He says, "I can't stay here one more night." He says, "Please." And I am already reaching for my car keys. My hands are shaking, but not from anxiety this time, from something else, something that feels a lot like being alive.